Welcome back to the Quarterly Call. All content is for informational purposes and is not investment advice. Please consult with an investment professional. All right, so Apple just came out with their Q1 2025 results.
Yeah.
And wow, stellar. A record-shattering $124.3 billion in revenue.
Really
A
impressive.
4% jump from last year.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? It's the highest they've ever reported.
I mean, that's incredible. And what's really fascinating is this success is happening all over the globe.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing record-breaking numbers pretty much everywhere with like really strong growth in emerging
I
markets,
was going to say, especially in India.
especially India. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was reading too.
Yeah.
And so this is where things get even more interesting. Apple's new AI features, they're calling it Apple Intelligence,
Right.
seems to be really boosting iPhone 16 sales, at least in the markets where it's available right now.
Makes sense.
What do you think this means for Apple's future? Especially because they're expanding these features to more languages and countries in April.
Yeah.
And an even more powerful Siri is on the way.
Well, it's definitely a signal that Apple is all in on AI.
Yeah.
It's not just adding some cool features. They're trying to change how we interact with our devices and, maybe gain an edge in the AI world, which is changing so rapidly.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see
Yeah.
how Apple is, weaving it into their strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm really curious to hear more about, the specific benefits
Sure.
they're highlighting with this Apple Intelligence. On the earnings call, they talked about things like enhanced writing tools, image playground for like creative editing,
Mm-hmm.
personalized Genmojis
Oh, wow.
that react to your emotions,
That's cool.
and even visual intelligence through camera control,
Wow.
plus seamless access to ChatGPT,
Oh, interesting.
and a cleanup feature to, I don't know, like automatically organize your photos. It sounds like a lot.
It does. It does. And the thing is, Apple's not just, throwing a bunch of features out there.
Right.
They're really integrating them with their current hardware and software.
Yeah.
It's a smooth, intuitive experience
Yeah, exactly.
that Apple users are used to.
And they're addressing like the biggest concern about AI.
Privacy.
Privacy, exactly.
Yeah.
They have this private cloud compute where a lot of the processing happens on your device rather than some, remote data center.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
seems like a big deal for protecting user data.
Absolutely. Privacy has always been so important to Apple, and they're not letting go of that with Apple Intelligence. It sets them apart, especially now when people are so worried about data security.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk iPhone. While the revenue was kind of flat year over year, $69.1 billion.
Right.
I think there's more to this story.
Yeah, you're right. While that number might not jump out at you,
Yeah.
Apple actually saw record-breaking numbers of people upgrading their iPhones this quarter,
Oh, really?
and their active installed base of iPhones all-time high.
Wow.
It shows you how much people love the iPhone, and they're sticking with it.
And it seems like the iPhone 16 is doing better than the iPhone 15 right from the start.
It is.
There must be some pretty good reasons for people to upgrade so fast.
Right.
I wonder if it has to do with these Apple Intelligence features being available early in certain markets.
It's possible we'll need more data to really understand how
Yeah.
much Apple Intelligence is impacting sales.
Right.
But it's looking good. These AI-powered features could be driving a lot of these upgrades in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, we can't talk about Apple without talking about China.
Yeah, right.
iPhone sales there dropped 11% compared to last year.
A bit of a dip.
They say it's because of some inventory changes and the fact that Apple Intelligence isn't available there yet.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. But, China just announced these new fiscal stimulus measures,
Oh, yeah.
and those include incentives for buying iPhones.
Interesting.
So we'll see how that affects Apple's numbers in the coming quarters. It'll be interesting to see how those measures, along with the eventual rollout of Apple Intelligence in China, will affect sales and how people use it.
Makes sense. Now, Macs and iPads, completely different story. It's a growth party over there.
It is.
Mac revenue jumped 16% year over year, hit $9 billion. iPad followed close behind with a 15% jump to $8.1 billion.
That's a nice increase.
And I think a lot of this growth comes from the new M4-powered products.
Yeah,
The MacBook Air is still a huge hit.
for sure.
It really shows how powerful and efficient Apple Silicon is. It's completely changed their computer lineup.
Definitely.
And get this, over half of the iPads sold this quarter were to people buying an iPad for the first time.
Wow.
Could this mean they're finally reaching a wider audience with the iPad?
It's a really good sign.
Yeah.
It looks like the iPad is finding its place in more and more situations.
Right.
From education and entertainment to work and being creative.
Yeah, totally.
And the fact that we're seeing double-digit growth in both Mac upgraders and people switching to Mac from other brands just shows how appealing Apple Silicon is. It's attracting both loyal customers and new ones.
That's a great point. It's not just about keeping the people they already have. It's about getting new people on board, too.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really smart.
Uh-huh.
Now let's talk about where Apple is really making bank. Services. They crushed their old revenue record, hitting a massive $26.3 billion.
Wow, that's huge.
A 14% increase from last year.
It's unbelievable. Services is clearly a powerhouse for Apple.
Yeah.
And it's growing steadily across every region and every type of service they offer. What's really mind-blowing is they have over 1 billion paid subscriptions across their platforms.
Seriously, 1 billion.
Yeah.
That's just, I can't even wrap my head around that.
It's a lot.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It shows you how integrated Apple's services are in people's lives. They're not just selling gadgets anymore. They're creating a whole digital world that people are paying to be a part of.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not stopping there. Customer engagement is still growing, with more people than ever making transactions and having paid accounts within Apple's ecosystem. They're expanding things like Tap to Pay, which makes it easier for businesses to take payments.
Right.
And they're adding new stuff to Apple Arcade and Fitness, plus giving people more reasons to stick around.
Now, let's talk about a place that's becoming really important for Apple. India. They had an amazing December quarter, smashed all their records there.
They did.
And they're even planning to open their first retail stores in India soon.
It's a big move.
What's really interesting is that the iPhone is the best-selling smartphone in India right now.
It is, yeah.
Think about how huge the Indian market is and how much it could grow.
It's massive.
It's a massive opportunity for Apple.
Yeah, it's like they've only just scratched the surface.
Exactly. If they can capture even a small part of that potential, it could be a game changer for their global growth.
It really could. And they're not just focused on selling in India. They're making iPhones there too, both for India and to export to other countries.
Oh, wow.
It's a strategic move, diversifying their supply chain and setting themselves up for success in a world that's constantly changing.
Really smart.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about something that's not always exciting, but really important for understanding Apple's financial health. Gross margins.
Okay.
Their guidance for the next quarter, Q2 2025, is between 46.5% and 47.5%.
Uh-huh.
Basically flat compared to this quarter.
Right.
Now, while flat margins might not sound amazing,
Yeah.
that's still a really healthy number for a company like Apple.
It is. They're dealing with a lot of moving parts, like changes in currency and the cost of components.
Yeah.
But they're also benefiting from good costs and the fact that their services business is growing, which tends to have better margins than hardware.
So even with some challenges, they're doing well financially. But the question is, can Apple actually improve product margins in the future?
That's the big question.
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
There are a few things that could make a difference. First, the prices of components. If those stay favorable, that could help.
Okay.
What else? Second, if more customers choose to buy the more expensive Pro models, that could boost margins too. And lastly, new products, especially ones related to AI and new technologies, could change things up and maybe lead to better profitability.
So there are both challenges and opportunities out there for Apple.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see how they handle it all.
It will. And you know, we can't ignore what's happening in the AI world, especially with this new DeepSeek technology.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that.
It's pretty groundbreaking. It could really bring down computing costs.
Huh. Interesting. What do you think this means for Apple? Some people think it can be a big advantage for them.
Well, any innovation that makes things more efficient is usually good, but Apple has always had this tightly integrated approach. Balancing on-device processing with cloud computing? Could DeepSeek disrupt that balance? Maybe. But Apple is known for thinking ahead and being strategic.
Yeah.
They've always invested in a hybrid model, with some processing on their devices and some in their private cloud.
Right.
This gives them flexibility and control over both performance and privacy.
So you're saying they're not putting all their eggs in one basket?
Exactly. They're careful about new technologies and make sure they benefit their users and their business.
It makes sense given their track record. They always seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah, they usually do. They'll definitely keep an eye on DeepSeek and other new technologies, making decisions that fit their long-term goals.
Now back to the iPhone for a second. Do you think there's much room left for big innovations in smartphones? Or have we pretty much reached the limit of what they can do?
You know, I think there's still a lot of potential in smartphones. We're just starting to see advancements in augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and battery technology. As those get better, we'll see totally new experiences and capabilities in the next few years.
That's exciting.
It is.
And Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, has hinted at a lot of new products coming.
Oh, yeah.
He seems pretty confident about their ability to keep innovating and surprising us. Maybe we're about to see something totally unexpected, something that changes what a smartphone even is.
It's definitely an interesting time to be following tech, especially with companies like Apple pushing the limits.
For sure.
We might be getting close to the limits of the traditional smartphone design,
Yeah.
but there's still so much potential for innovation within that design and beyond.
I can't wait to see what they come up with next.
Me neither.
Okay, let's dig a little deeper into those impressive upgrade numbers we talked about earlier.
Okay.
What do you think is making so many iPhone owners trade in their old devices? Is it just Apple Intelligence? Or is there something else going on?
Remember, Apple had an all-time high for iPhone upgrades this quarter.
Right.
And their active installed base is at a record high, too.
Yeah.
It seems like the iPhone 16 is a really attractive upgrade from the iPhone 15. It has enough new features and improvements to convince people to switch.
Yeah, it makes sense that it's not just one thing.
Right.
It's probably a bunch of factors combined.
Exactly. Apple Intelligence is a big draw, especially where it's available. But other things like better cameras, faster processing, and longer battery life are probably playing a role, too.
Yeah, I bet. Speaking of upgrades, what about the new iPad Pro?
Oh, yeah.
The latest M4 version is super thin and sleek.
It is.
Did that design change really boost sales? What are people saying about it?
Well, while overall iPad sales were up a good 15% this quarter,
Yeah.
most of that growth came from the iPad Air and the basic iPad, not the Pro models. So maybe the slimmer design of the iPad Pro isn't the biggest selling point for most people.
Yeah, maybe not.
But what's really amazing is that more than half of the iPads sold this quarter went to people who had never owned an iPad before.
Wow, that's huge.
It is.
It seems like they're finally getting a whole new group of people to use iPads.
Exactly. It's really positive for Apple.
What do you think is causing this shift?
It could be a few things. Maybe the prices are more competitive now. Maybe the features are better for a wider range of users. Or maybe their marketing is really good at showing how versatile the iPad is. It's hard to say for sure, but it's great news for Apple's tablet business.
Absolutely. Now let's dive into the world of Apple services, which is still a huge success story. They're breaking revenue records left and right, with growth across all their segments.
Yep, services revenue hit a record $26.3 billion, up 14% from last year. And this growth is consistent everywhere, both in developed and emerging markets.
So it's like a well-oiled machine, but they're not without their challenges, right? Like the regulatory issues they're dealing with in different parts of the world. How is that affecting their services business?
Those regulatory challenges are definitely ongoing, and they're a real hurdle for Apple. But even with those hurdles, Apple services business is incredibly strong and resilient.
Resilience is a good word these days.
Yeah.
But what kind of impact are those regulatory hurdles having? Could they be holding back services revenue even more than we realize? What about margins?
It's tough to say exactly how much impact they're having,
Yeah.
but it's clear that they are a factor. Apple is actively working through those challenges.
Okay.
And the fact that services is still growing shows they're doing a pretty good job of it.
All right, fair enough. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the enterprise market. Are businesses getting on board with Apple? What kind of adoption are they seeing there?
It looks like Apple is gaining traction with businesses.
Yeah.
For instance, Deutsche Bank has a program called Mac as Choice for their developers, and now they're giving the newest MacBook Air as the standard computer to their mortgage lending division. And companies like SAP are using Apple Intelligence features in the U.S. to improve both employee and customer experiences.
So they're making inroads with big companies, not just focusing on individual consumers.
Exactly. And it's not just in developed markets.
Yeah.
Zomato, a big food delivery company in India, has given out thousands of Macs to their employees.
That's amazing. So they're really taking their enterprise strategy global.
They are.
And what about their Vision Pro headset? Are they seeing any interest in that from businesses?
There are some really promising use cases for Vision Pro in the enterprise world. For example, Cisco is using it for their spatial meetings.
What's that?
It's this fully immersive video conferencing experience.
Oh, wow.
Perfect for remote collaboration and learning.
That sounds super futuristic.
It is.
Now, let's talk about Apple's financial resources. They finished the quarter with like $141 billion in cash and marketable securities.
That's a lot of money.
It's a ton of money. What are they doing with all that capital?
A good chunk of it is going back to shareholders. This quarter, they returned over $30 billion, including $3.9 billion in dividends and $23.3 billion through share buybacks.
That's a nice return for investors.
It is.
What about their guidance for the March quarter? They're expecting revenue growth in the low to mid-single digits, right?
That's right. But remember, they're expecting a negative impact of about 2.5 percentage points because the dollar is getting stronger.
Oh, the joys of currency fluctuations.
Yeah.
So they're actually predicting slightly stronger growth if you adjust for that.
That's one way to look at it.
And they're also expecting services revenue to grow by low double digits. But without the currency exchange impact, that growth would be about the same as the December quarter.
Yes, exactly.
So basically they're saying their services business is still going strong.
Exactly.
And as for gross margins, they're predicting 46.5% to 47.5%, which, as we talked about, is pretty much flat from the last quarter.
Right.
We've already discussed the reasons behind that, but I'm curious, what could actually lead to better product margins in the future?
There are a few things to keep in mind. The cost of components is one. If those prices stay good, that could help.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Also, if more people choose to buy the Pro models, which have higher margins, that could help too. And finally, if they release new AI-related devices, that could change things and potentially improve profitability.
So it all depends on how those trends develop over the next few quarters.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It always is with Apple.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question before we wrap up this segment. We've talked a lot about India, but are there any other, emerging markets that are on Apple's radar? Any hidden gems they're excited about?
Well, India is definitely a big opportunity,
Right.
but Apple is seeing good results in other emerging markets too.
Oh, yeah.
Places like Latin America,
Right.
the Middle East, and South Asia. They're hitting all-time revenue records in a lot of these regions.
So their global expansion strategy is working.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
And it's not just about selling more iPhones. Their installed base is growing by double digits in these emerging markets.
Oh, wow.
Which means people are really engaging with their products and services.
That's a good sign for the future, right?
Definitely. It shows they're building a loyal customer base in these areas, which is crucial for long-term success.
Okay, let's go back to Apple Intelligence for a sec.
Sure.
Do you think it's just a matter of time before it really takes off and becomes like a mainstream thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or are there still some hurdles they need to clear?
I think Apple Intelligence has the potential to be huge,
Yeah.
but they need to reach more people and show them how useful it is.
Right.
Launching in more markets and languages is key.
So accessibility is important.
Exactly.
The more people who can use it and see its benefits, the faster it'll catch on.
That's right. It's the network effect.
Yeah.
The more people use it, the more valuable it becomes. And don't forget, they're making Siri even smarter.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That could be a game changer.
Imagine having a truly intelligent assistant right there in your pocket.
That'd be amazing.
One that understands what you need and can even predict what you want.
Exactly.
That could totally change how we use our devices.
Absolutely. As Apple keeps innovating and improving its AI, it has the potential to revolutionize how we interact with technology,
Yeah.
making it more seamless, more intuitive, and more personal.
It's an exciting time to be an Apple user, that's for sure.
It is.
Speaking of exciting, let's talk about Apple's record-breaking quarter. We've covered a lot today, from their incredible financial performance to their investments in AI and emerging markets.
Yeah, we have.
It's been a lot.
We've seen how Apple is navigating this complex global situation,
Right.
dealing with things like currency changes and regulations, but also taking advantage opportunities in fast-growing regions and new technologies.
And even with those challenges, Apple is still innovating, finding new ways to impress its customers and stay at the top of the tech world.
They're committed to creating a great user experience,
Yeah.
prioritizing privacy, and expanding their ecosystem of products and services.
And that's what makes them so successful.
Definitely.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything for this episode.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Quarterly Call.
Thanks for having me.
For more episodes, please remember to rate and follow our show.
We appreciate it.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. Apple seems to be doing incredibly well, but they're not without their challenges. We've talked about the issues with currency exchange rates and regulations, but what other potential roadblocks do you see for Apple in the future?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the growing competition in AI.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon are putting a ton of money into developing AI,
Right.
and they all want to be the leader in this field, which is changing so quickly.
Yeah.
Apple needs to make sure that Apple Intelligence stays competitive
Okay.
and keeps offering something unique and valuable to its users.
Yeah, it's not enough to just have AI features.
Right.
They have to be the best, the easiest to use, and the most privacy-focused features out there.
Absolutely.
Apple has a history of innovation.
Yeah,
So I'm pretty confident they'll keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI.
I agree. And it's not just about competing with the other big tech companies.
Right.
Apple also needs to stay ahead of the game when it comes to new technologies and changing consumer trends.
For sure.
The tech world is always evolving,
Yeah, always.
and Apple needs to be flexible and adapt to stay on top.
It's like walking a tightrope.
It is.
They need to keep what makes them strong, but also be open to new opportunities and be ready for future challenges.
Exactly. And one area where that balance is important is how they approach hardware versus software and services.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We've talked about how services is a huge growth area for Apple,
Right.
but they can't forget about their hardware products.
You're right. The iPhone, the Mac, the iPad, and the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
These are all iconic products that help make Apple what it is today.
Exactly.
And they built a really loyal customer base.
Yeah.
Apple needs to keep innovating in those areas to stay relevant and desirable to consumers.
Definitely. And it's not just about individual products.
What do you mean?
Apple has to think about how all their products and services work together to create a seamless and appealing ecosystem.
Right.
That's what sets them apart from so many other companies.
It's like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly.
So while Apple is in a great spot right now,
Uh-huh.
they can't just sit back and relax.
No.
They need to stay focused on innovation,
Right.
adapt to changes in the market,
Absolutely.
and maintain their commitment to giving users the best possible experience.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Apple's record-breaking quarter. We looked at their financial success, their strategic moves in AI and emerging markets, and the challenges and opportunities ahead.
It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has.
And I hope our listeners now have a better understanding of where Apple stands today and where it might be headed in the coming years.
I think they do.
It's an exciting time for Apple.
It really is. Thank you so much for tuning into the Quarterly Call. For more episodes, please remember to rate and follow our show. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.